excited you could all come here today and hear them a little bit. First, I'll introduce Cory first, and then he's going to talk a little bit, or rather probably read a little bit from one of his recent works, and then we'll get the other people talking too. I have a few more questions for them afterwards, and then we'll leave some time for you at the end. So if you want to be thinking about what you want to ask, please get going on that. Cory Doctrow is an award-winning science fiction author, activist, journalist, and blogger. He's a co-editor of Boing Boing and the author of the young adult novels Little Brother, a 2008 New York Times bestseller, and last year's For the Win. With an enduring interest in open copyright and digital rights laws, he is the former European director of the Electronic Frontier Foundation and co-founded the UK Open Rights Group. His fiction takes us around the globe when gamers unite online for workers' rights, and into the near future where dancing Elmo dolls can be converted to work in a team to drive a smart car. Cory's fiction is thought-provoking, politically aware, funny, frightening, and incredibly fast. Born in Toronto, Canada, Cory is our only panelist today who is not from Brooklyn. Instead, he joins us from his home in London, England. Welcome, Cory.
Thank you. I'm not actually joining you from my home in London. That would be rather a good trick, but I have come here by way of London. I'm going to read to you a little from my novel For the Win. That's my most recent young adult novel, and it's a book about young people who use video games to establish a union in China, India, and other places around the world. They're able to do this because they're better at using video games than their bosses are, and so they're able to outmaneuver their bosses. And I'm going to read to you a little scene about one of the formative events in the union's history. The only thing you need to know is that the characters in this work in what's called a gold farm. That's a place where people play video games all day to amass video game gold and armor and weapons that are then sold on to other players who are either lazy or not very good at the game or strapped for time, and who pay them for these items. Reeling was a hell of a player. His specialty was player versus player play, because he had the knack of watching another player's movements for a few seconds and then building up a near complete view of his idiosyncrasies and weak spots. He couldn't explain it. The knowledge simply shone through him like an arrow in the eye socket. The upshot of this was that no one could level a character faster than Reeling. He'd simply wander around a game with a Chinese name, talking in Chinese to the players he met. Eventually, one of them, some rich, fat, stupid Westerner who wanted to play vigilante, would start calling him names and challenge him to a fight. He would accept, he would kick ass, he would gain points. It was amazing how satisfying this was. Reeling had just finished 12 hours of this and had ordered in a tray of pork dumplings and doused them in hot Vietnamese red rooster sauce and chopsticked them into his mouth as fast as he could chew, and now he was ready to relax with some after-work play. For this, he always used his own tune, a char he'd started playing with when he was a boy in Gansu. In some ways, this tune was him. So long had he lived with it, lovingly buffing it, training it, dressing it in the rarest of treasures. He had trained up innumerable tunes and seen them sold off, but Reeling was his. Tonight, Reeling partied with some other farmers he knew from other parts of China, some of whom he'd known back in the village, some of whom he'd never met. They were a ferocious nightly raiding guild that pulled off the hardest missions in the world, the cream of the crop. Word had gotten round, and now every night he had an audience of players who'd just been hired on, watching in awe as he kicked fantastic quantities of ass. He loved that, loved answering their questions after he was done playing, helping the whole team get better, and you know, they loved him too, and that was just great. So they ran Buri's fortress, the palace of a long-departed god, the father of gods, the powerful elemental force that had birthed Svartalfheim warriors and the universe in which it lay. It had fearsome guardians, required powerful spells just to reach, and had never been fully run in the entire history of Svartalfheim warriors. Just the kind of mission Reeling loved to try. This would be his 6th crack at it. And then he got Fenrir's Tooth. It was the rarest and most legendary drop in all of Svartalfheim warriors, a powerful talisman that would turn any wolf pack or enthrall them to the Tooth's holder. The message boards had been full of talk about it, and several times there had been fraudulent auctions for it, but no one had ever really seen it before. After Reeling picked it up, he was so stunned by it that he couldn't speak for a moment. He just pointed at his screen while his mouth opened and shut. The players watching him fell silent too, following his gaze and his finger, slowly realizing what had just happened. A murmur built through the crowd, picking up steam, picking up volume, turning into a roar, a triumphant shout that brought the entire cafe over to see. Over the fans' noise, they buzzed excitedly, a hormone-drenched, triumphant tribal chest beating that swept them all up. Every boy imagined what it would be like to go questing with Fenrir's tooth, able to defeat any force with the flick of the mouse. Every boy's heart thudded in his chest. But there was another sound, getting louder and more insistent, an older voice, raspy with a million cigarettes, a hard voice. Sit down, back to work, everyone back to work. It was Wang, the foreman, shouting with his fearsome Fujianese accent. He was rumored to be ex-snakehead, thrown out of the human smuggling gang for killing too many migrants with rough treatment. Usually, he sat lizard-like and motionless in the corner, smoking a succession of cheap Chinese Class D fake Marlboros, harsh and unfiltered, a lazy curl of smoke giving him a permanent squint on one side of his face. Sometimes players would forget that he was there, and their shouting and horseplay would get a little out of control, and then he would steal up behind them on his cat-silent feet and deliver a hard blow to the ear that would send them reeling. It was enough of an object lesson. Don't make the snakehead mad, or I'll give you a beating you won't forget, that he hardly ever had to repeat it. Now, though, he was clouting boys left and right, bellowing orders in his loud, hoarse voice. The boys retreated to their computers in a shoving rush, leaving Ri-Ling alone in his seat, an uncertain smile on his face. "Boss, you see what I've done?" He pointed to his screen. Wang's face was as impassive as ever. He put a hard, heavy hand on Ri-Ling's shoulder and leaned in to read the screen, his head wreathed in smoke. Finally, he straightened. "Fenrir's tooth," he said. He nodded. "A bonus for you, Ri-Ling. Very good." Ri-Ling shrank back. "Boss," he said respectfully, speaking loudly to be heard over the computer fans. "Boss, that's my character. I'm not working now. It's my personal character." Wang turned to look at him, his eyes and his expression flat. "A bonus," he said. "Well done." "It's my character," Ri-Ling said, speaking more loudly. "No bonus, it's mine. I earned it personally on my own time." He didn't even see the blow. It was that fast. 1 minute he was hotly declaring that Fenrir's tooth was his, and the next he was sprawled on his ass on the floor, his head ringing like a gong. The foreman put one foot on his throat. The man said clearly, "No bonus," and so that everyone around could hear. Then he hawked up a huge mouthful of poisonous green spit from the tar-soaked depths of his blackened lungs and carefully spat it in Ri-Ling's face.